Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the Russian Air Force has played a central role in the Kremlin's military strategy. Even though Russia has never managed to achieve full air superiority over Ukraine, its air power remains absolutely critical to the war effort. It is the Russian Air Force that enables the massive use of glide bombs, providing devastating close air support to Russian ground forces. It is also the Air Force that launches cruise missiles and ballistic missiles deep into Ukraine's strategic rear, targeting infrastructure, cities, and military facilities far from the front lines. Put simply, without the sustained use of air power, Russia would struggle to achieve meaningful success on either the operational or the strategic level. And while the Russian Air Force has managed to carry out a large number of missions over the past 4 years, this situation may be approaching a breaking point. Because as we move toward 2026, Putin's Air Force is facing enormous structural problems, and the risk of a serious collapse is becoming increasingly real. To understand why a collapse of the Russian Air Force would be so dramatic, we first need to take a closer look at the role Russia's air forces have played throughout the war in Ukraine. When we examine the conflict more closely, it becomes clear that Russian air power has been decisive at nearly every stage of the war. In the opening phase of the invasion, Russian aircraft struck numerous high-value Ukrainian targets and helped degrade Ukraine's defensive capabilities early on. While these strikes failed to deliver decisive victory, they nevertheless shaped the battlefield in Russia's favor during the early months. Later, in 2023, Russian air power once again became critically important. In particular, Russian attack helicopters such as the K-52 Alligator played a key role in stopping Ukraine's counteroffensive in the south. Operating over flat terrain, these helicopters were able to engage Ukrainian armored units from long distances using upgraded missiles, often outside the effective range of Ukrainian air defenses. Western intelligence agencies would later describe the K-52 as one of the most influential Russian weapon systems in slowing Ukraine's advance. Although Ukraine eventually pushed many of these helicopters away from the front lines using long-range strikes and Western-supplied missiles, another, even more destructive threat continued to grow throughout 2024. Russian tactical bombers and their widespread use of glide bombs became one of the most feared weapons of the war. Dropped primarily by aircraft such as the Su-34, these glide bombs often carry warheads weighing up to 1 ton. When they strike, they are capable of obliterating fortified positions, trenches and bunkers, often leaving nothing behind. But these weapons have not only been used against military targets. Civilian infrastructure near the front lines has also suffered enormously. Entire neighborhoods, apartment blocks, schools and hospitals have been reduced to rubble by Russian glide bomb attacks. In many areas where these weapons were employed, the destruction was so complete that cities appeared almost erased from the map. This massive use of glide bombs has been one of the main reasons why Russian ground forces have been able to advance at all in recent months. The tactic itself is brutally simple. Russian aircraft first destroy Ukrainian defensive positions using glide bombs and heavy artillery, and then infantry units attempt to move in and capture the ruins. This approach does not always succeed, and Ukrainian forces have often managed to hold their ground despite horrific losses. But many of Russia's limited territorial gains can be directly traced back to this method of warfare. The same pattern can be observed in areas like Pokrovsk, where Russian sabotage and assault units rarely advance without first relying on massive air and artillery strikes to level entire districts. On the strategic level, the Russian Air Force remains just as dangerous. Almost daily, Russian strategic bombers take off from bases deep inside Russia and launch cruise missiles toward Ukrainian cities. In addition, MiG-31 aircraft regularly fire Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, weapons designed to overwhelm air defenses and strike critical targets. So even though Russian aircraft are largely unable to enter Ukrainian-controlled airspace freely, and true air superiority has never been achieved, Russian air power remains one of the pillars of Putin's war. That is precisely why Ukraine has increasingly focused on targeting Russia's air forces themselves. Some of Ukraine's most spectacular attacks of the war have been directed against Russian aircraft and air bases. The most dramatic example is undoubtedly Operation Spiderweb. After more than a year of planning, Ukrainian intelligence managed to damage or destroy around 40 Russian strategic bombers in a single coordinated operation. With one strike, roughly a third of Russia's bomber fleet was taken out of action. FPV drones, smuggled deep into Russian territory and launched from hidden trucks, struck multiple air bases simultaneously. According to Ukrainian officials, the damage amounted to billions of dollars and severely reduced Russia's ability to conduct long-range missile strikes. But this was far from the only successful attack. Over time, Ukrainian forces have steadily increased the pressure on Russian aviation. What were once isolated pinprick strikes have recently turned into a growing pattern of sustained losses. In particular, Russian aircraft stationed on the occupied Crimean Peninsula have been hit repeatedly. Transport planes, fighter jets, and even high-value aircraft have been destroyed directly on runways or inside air bases. In some cases, aircraft were hit while their engines were still running, killing entire crews. In others, Ukrainian drones destroyed MiG-31s and Su-27s that Russia can ill afford to lose. Even more troubling for the Kremlin, Ukrainian-aligned partisans have begun carrying out sabotage operations deep inside Russia itself. In the Lipetsk region, resistance fighters managed to set multiple Su-30 fighter jets on fire at a military airfield hundreds of kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Ukraine has also released footage showing the destruction of an Il-38 maritime patrol and anti-submarine aircraft, a model that is no longer in production and therefore impossible for Russia to replace. At this point, some observers may ask a reasonable question. Before the war, Russia possessed hundreds, if not thousands, of aircraft. How could the loss of a few dozen planes possibly bring the Russian Air Force to the brink of collapse? And on the surface, that argument makes sense. Conservative estimates suggest that Russia entered the war with around 780 tactical combat aircraft, not even counting bombers, transport planes, or helicopters. Losing several dozen aircraft, while painful, should theoretically be manageable. But the real problem for the Kremlin lies elsewhere. The greatest threat to the Russian Air Force is not just Ukrainian missiles or drones. It is maintenance, aging airframes, and the relentless wear caused by years of non-stop combat operations. Modern combat aircraft require intensive maintenance. Their engines, avionics, and structural components have limited lifespans and strict service intervals. Due to the extreme operational tempo of the war, Russian aircraft are flying far more hours than originally planned. This has dramatically shortened their remaining service life. By 2024, this issue had already become impossible to ignore. Western defense analysts estimate that Russia's air and space forces were operating at only around 75% of their pre-war strength. While direct combat losses accounted for some of this decline, an even larger portion came from so-called implicit losses. These are aircraft that have not been shot down but are effectively lost because their airframes and engines are worn out beyond safe operational limits. In 2024 alone, Russia may have lost around 60 aircraft simply due to overuse. At the same time, Russian industry is only able to produce roughly 20 new modern fighter jets per year. More than half of Russia's tactical aircraft fleet is now over 30 years old. Many of these planes have very little remaining service life left. As a result, Russia increasingly relies on its newest aircraft, such as the Su-30, Su-34, and Su-35, for frontline missions, while older models like the MiG-31 and Su-27 are pushed into secondary roles. Every time a modern aircraft is destroyed, the burden on the remaining fleet increases. And every time older aircraft are forced back into combat, they move one step closer to permanent retirement. The situation is made even worse by severe maintenance problems. Russia lacks both the trained personnel and the spare parts needed to properly maintain its air fleet. Many critical electronic components were originally sourced from Western countries such as Germany, the United States and Japan. Since the start of the war, sanctions have largely cut off these supply chains. As a result, Russia faces an acute shortage of spare parts across both its civilian and military aviation sectors. If Ukraine can maintain its current level of attacks on Russian air assets, the Kremlin could soon face a cascading failure. Not because every aircraft has been destroyed, but because the remaining fleet becomes impossible to sustain. Each loss increases the pressure on the aircraft that remain, accelerating wear and pushing maintenance systems beyond their limits. What began as dozens of implicit losses could quickly grow into hundreds. And at that point, even Russia's once formidable air force would struggle to meet operational demands. All of this is happening while Ukraine's own air force is gradually growing stronger. Ukraine already operates F-16s, and in the coming years is expected to receive dozens of Rafale fighters from France and potentially up to 150 Gripen-E aircraft from Sweden. While Russia's air power risks stagnation or decline, Ukraine's air capabilities are set to improve steadily over time. So the question now is not whether the Russian Air Force is under pressure. That much is already clear. The real question is how long Russia can sustain the current intensity of air operations before structural weaknesses turn into a full-blown crisis. Let me know what you think. How long can Russia realistically keep this pace? And are we already witnessing the early stages of a collapse?